Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the People of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. The People of Penn State podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Go ahead, subscribe, give us a rating, write us a review. All of those things help fellow Penn Staters find these great stories that we have to pass along to you. And another great one today, we're talking with Katie Taylor. She is the co-founder and CEO of Child Life on Call, a digital platform revolutionizing pediatric healthcare, putting parents at the center of the medical journey. With over 13 years of experience as a certified child life specialist, Katie's made significant contributions to the field of child life and families. She has served over a decade of working at their side. She is an accomplished author, an engaging speaker on child life and entrepreneurship, and the host of the Child Life on Call podcast. Katie's work emphasizes the vital role of child life services in supporting caregivers and enhancing children's medical journeys. Welcome to the People of Penn State, Katie Taylor. How are you today, Katie?
Hi, Paul. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So where are you based out of? Where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually in Austin, Texas, just sweating it out down here, like 30 plus days over 100. But this podcast could not be more timely, Paul, because I literally just got back from Penn State about 48 hours ago. It was my first time back in 11 years. So it was a blast.
Excellent. What brought you back to campus?
I was lucky enough to be on the Penn State dance team. And while I was there, we became the Lionettes. And so we had just a mini reunion and just lots of fun this past weekend getting to see each other again after a while.
That's amazing. We are great partners with Curtis White and the team over there. And don't you mean the three-time national champion Lionettes?
I cannot take any credit for that. We were not nearly as good. I mean, that team is phenomenal. Their coach, Julie Berardi, brought them to a new level. So it's been a blast to watch them and put it up there. Thank goodness I was there before a lot of social media. So you don't have to watch my high kick, or it's not on video or anything like that.
Well, we'll get maybe back to that in just a second. But let's start right at the beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Yeah, all props go to my brother. We were in Dallas. We grew up in a town called Plano, north of Dallas, and he was a baseball player. So he got invited to go walk onto the baseball team. And while he was trying out for the team, I went to go visit him, and I just thought, this is college? No way. And so really just fell in love with the campus. I think the spirit of volunteerism through Thon, getting to try out and be a part of the dance team, all things just kind of aligned, and followed my brother there a couple years after.
So you talked about being a Lionette. What are some of the things that you remember as a student and some of the things that you were involved in while you were here?
Yeah. So I think I just got really lucky to be able to just be sucked up into this group of amazing female athletes as a dance team member. And so that kind of helped, bridge the transition from Texas to Pennsylvania and just kind of having a home base of people. And so I would say kind of the leaders on the team, my peers. And I think one of the most influential parts was we were planning for this thing called Thon, and I knew a little bit about it, and I was on a committee because everyone told me to be on a committee. But about a week before Thon, our senior dance team member, she was sick, she got a blood clot, and they needed someone to step in. So I ended up dancing as a freshman for those 48 hours,
Oh, wow.
which just changed the trajectory of my Penn State path.
That's amazing. Nothing like getting thrown into that at the last minute. No preparation. No, especially coming from Texas, not even having seen it before.
I mean, the confidence of my little naivete 18-year-old self was just perfect, right? To just be like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah, it's not. And nowadays, it's become more and more prevalent where freshmen do dance in Thon. A lot of our sometimes the student athletes that it happens to, where a team like soccer, I remember a couple of years ago, soccer earns a spot. they didn't submit a dancer name until 2 weeks before Thon, and they picked two walk-ons on the team that
Whoa.
ended up dancing and did fantastic.
That
And now
that's
they're
amazing.
stars. They're both actually stars of the nationally ranked men's soccer team here. So
Whoa. Well, not surprised. That's a very it's a life-changing experience.
absolutely. On the academic side, when you came to Penn State, what did you want to study? What were your initial career goals?
Yeah, I'm really lucky that I have parents who, brought both my brother and myself up. That's like we're here in this world to make it a better place. So whatever path you choose, make sure you're influencing someone else. And my mom's a child abuse prevention advocate. My dad works in healthcare, making sure everybody has access to it. And so I knew I loved working with children, and I knew I kind of loved communication and getting to connect with people. So I really kind of saw myself as like a nonprofit outreach person, and went into the School of Communications. And so that's kind of where I really saw myself. I didn't know that I would end up using all of my skills and all of the things I learned at Penn State. You can't really understand the path that you're going to be on, but it's really fun to see where my career has landed me and the foundation that Penn State gave me.
All right, let's go ahead. Give a shout out to fellow Penn State or your brother, and let us know what he's up to.
Jimmy Donovan, man, that guy, he's awesome. So he ended up not making the athletic or the varsity team for baseball, but ended up doing club baseball, which was incredible, such a fun experience. He was a major in sports broadcast journalism, and has since kind of gone into the marketing world. So really worked for newspapers right out. And then, of course, those didn't last as long as he thought, but he's just an excellent writer, an amazing marketing guy, and is kind of following a similar path of working in healthcare and startups and making sure people have what they need.
Excellent, excellent. Is he also based in Texas?
He's here in Austin. We're all together. It's a good time.
That's amazing.
Of
This is the
course, he was
people.
so jealous of my pictures that I sent this weekend. He's like, "Oh, I got to get back right away."
Absolutely, absolutely. That definitely more than once every 11 years. I mean,
For sure. What are we thinking?
exactly. This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Katie Taylor. She is the co-founder and CEO of Child Life on Call. So let's dive in a little bit about how Penn State prepared you. You talked about going to the School of Communications at the time. How Penn State prepared you to become an entrepreneur and enter what we'll call the helping professions.
Yeah, sure. So I think the most transformative experience for me were both being on the dance team and volunteering in Thon. And I think what both those opportunities do is allow you to be a leader at Penn State. So the academic stuff was really important, but I have to say, like being a peer leader, coming up and problem solving, just kind of all those skills about communication and having to work together collaboratively really helped set my path. And it was one time when I was volunteering at Hershey Medical Center as a part of my Thon duties, and I met a child life specialist. And I said, you are exactly who I want to be. I want to be a child life specialist. I didn't even know there was a name for this. And so since I was ending my career at Penn State, finishing in communications, I had a minor in both sociology and business. I ended up getting a job right out of college, and worked at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I went back to night school in Northern Virginia to be able to get the credits and the academic background that I needed to become a child life specialist. And because I was in the DC metro area, I got to connect with a lot of Penn State alumni, start to use my connections, and eventually was lucky enough to get into the field after a couple of applications to internships, and just became a lifelong passion of being a child life specialist.
Well, walk us through that, how you became a child life specialist, and kind of give us a sense of your background from your clinical experience, and including opening up services at a level 3 NIC, NICU, and becoming a supervisor.
Yeah. So if you don't know what a child life specialist is, that is okay. Many people don't really, unless you've spent time in a children's hospital, or when you're there, you hope you find a child life specialist. So we really help with the psychosocial well-being of children and families when they're in the hospital. So that comes with helping manage pain, helping children and families understand their diagnosis, being disconnected from loved ones or their school. And we really come at it from a child development, trauma informed, family centered lens. And so our clinical work at the beginning is very strong in child development and family centered care. So we look at the whole family system and how can we really help them cope. So we have a series of coping skills and educational things that we teach families. So we can really be, one moment in the playroom hosting a bingo session for kids and families, the next moment really be in the trauma bay supporting a family at the end of life. So we kind of run the gamut of the whole hospital and healthcare experience. I think what really was important to me was making sure that every single family had access to child life services. One of the problems in our profession is that we're not able to see everybody. So when I was able to be a part of the expansion of a child life services in a hospital, in a clinical setting, opening up services to a completely new unit for the first time, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the hospital system, and was really just able to connect with families and provide child life services in a totally different way. I'm not the first person to open up child life services in a NICU setting, but it is a kind of a newer place in our field where you won't always find child life. So it was really exciting, not only for myself and for the hospital that I was in, but really for the field in general, to see our scope can really expand beyond these traditional, maybe pediatric intensive care or med surg or operations. We can go to other places in the clinical setting.
So I'm not terribly familiar um, with what it means to be a child life specialist, right? As I listen to you talk, it sounds like it's a more holistic approach to healthcare, right? It's not someone presents with cancer and you attack the cancer, right? It's also taking a look at the mental aspect to going through a battle like that, the supporting the support system around the patient. Is that an accurate way to describe that? It's more than just beating cancer, but it's helping to kind of help with the mental aspects of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on the money there. We know that cancer is, a clinical diagnosis, but there are social and emotional and mental effects not only on the patient but their entire family. What I really became passionate about was how do the skills that I have, what can I give to parents and caregivers so that because they can't take child life home with them, what can I teach them right now that they can continue to use? And I've spoken with a number of parents who've said, the skills I learned from our child life specialist when my child had cancer, I now use like when it's time to, get ready for school for the first time, or we have this challenging life event, or there's a death in the family, or any of these challenging life events that come up, but really addressing the whole spirit of the child. And what's amazing in pediatric healthcare is that they look at the holistic part of the child. We're not just treating the cancer in this child, but we're treating the whole family, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I think of adults, for example, who go through something, say, like a heart patient that has a defibrillator implanted, right? There's a whole series of psychological services set up to help the heart patient understand what it's like to now have a device that might shock them, and how to handle that mentally, right? As an adult, that's a difficult thing to wrap your mind around. How is it with children? I mean, certainly you're working with parents as their support system, but there's also kind of, I'm sure, direct one-on-one, sessions that you do with children. How are you able to help them kind of deal with and cope what's going on with them?
Yeah, such a good question, Paul. You can be an honorary child life specialist. I love your you totally get it now. So we're really a play-based profession, and what that means is we know that the natural language of children is play, and so however it's possible, whatever it looks like at any age and stage, we try to integrate that. So that can be like using medical play dolls, right? So having them draw the cancer cells on the doll's body and then in one color. And in the next color, we use the chemotherapy color. And so we really go by child development. So for preschoolers who are really into magical thinking, we can say, the chemotherapy are the superhero players and the cancer are the bad guys. As children get older, we want to prepare them for what the experience is going to be like. I often talk about the example I was preparing a child for going back to surgery. And so I showed them a picture of the operating room. And as we were looking at the operating room before the child went back, I pointed out some of the things that they might see to try to normalize the experience. So there's a bed back there. The anesthesia doctor actually has a green balloon. Your job is going to be to blow up the green balloon. And looking at the top of the picture, you see these big circles. And I said, well, what do you think those are? And the child said, well, those are the daggers that are going to shoot inside my body. And I said, actually, those are just the lights. Just like when you go to the dentist, there's big round lights there. And they said, oh, thank goodness. But you really understand that children can have fear around the unknown, just like adults can. And so by actually talking about things and giving them a heads up and kind of demystifying the experience, we totally empower them. I can only imagine what that little guy would have felt like rolling in on a operating room bed and seeing those things and saying, oh my gosh, those are the daggers. But instead he rolled in and thought, oh, those are the lights that are going to help the doctors do the best job that they can.
It's you talked about being active with Thon at Penn State, and it sounds like there's a lot of crossover between the origin story of Thon with the story of the knight and the four diamonds, and the diamonds are courage, wisdom, honesty, and strength, right? And it's that kind of story that really helps children who are battling. I mean, the story was written by a kid, battling cancer back in the 70s, about late 60s, early 70s, and it's still being used today as a way to help children kind of cope with what they're going through.
Yeah. I mean, the forethought of that child who clearly just felt so supported and empowered by his family to actually write down his thoughts. The Millard and the whole Four Diamonds story has been instrumental in my work as a child life specialist, but even as a parent now.
It's funny. I couldn't write a story like Christopher Millard wrote
I know.
today, right? Much less when he wrote it and what he was going through. It was it's amazing. They gave out copies that they turned it into a not a graphic novel, but like a comic book, if you will, for children now at Hershey, and we have a copy of that here. Talk a little bit about how you've grown as an entrepreneur and how you utilize kind of all three pieces of your education from Penn State, whether it's public relations, sociology, or business, right? That sounds like you have taken all three of those areas and molded a business out of that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think those foundational academics things that I learned when I was at Penn State have all kind of come to fruition. So, the sociology was a big part of my academic upbringing to become a child life specialist. The business, the entrepreneur side. So, tapping into that brain that I learned about in terms of market and sales and business and accounting and all of those things that I thought I'm never going to use this, but in fact I do. And then going back to the PR and one of the gaps I saw as a child life specialist that kind of started my career as an entrepreneur in the field is that I was working at the time in a small children's hospital, and the parents weren't able to connect like they do in a large hospital. In a larger hospital, you typically see other families around. You can kind of have that camaraderie. You meet other people on the floor, the same unit as you. But these parents were really lacking that connection. And I had a mom say to me, please tell me someone else that has gone through this before. And at that time, I wish that I could just put a little podcast in her ear and say, here's a mom who's gone through it. But that didn't exist at the time back in 2017. Podcasts were a thing, but there were no podcasts that focused on the parent side of having a child go through a healthcare experience. So Child Life on Call really worked to fill that gap. And as that kind of created in our little niche community of child life as another resource to provide to parents, we started getting really curious about what other technology can child life services use to empower families going through this difficult time. And that's really where Child Life on Call, the entrepreneurship, started to take off. And, we created an LLC. My dad became my chief strategy officer and co-founder. And so since then, we're an organization of, a small, strong team of just under 5 who are looking at how what we have now is a product that's a mobile app. We're selling to hospitals to help them expand child life services. Since child life specialists only see about 30% to 50% of families who come through, we want all families to have access. And that's really what our Child Life on Call product does.
It's amazing. I love talking to entrepreneurs and asking them um, about the moment, right? If you think about, we talked about Christopher Millard and the 4 diamonds, right? Courage, wisdom, honesty, and strength. I think that those 4 diamonds could actually be used to describe what it takes to be a good entrepreneur as well, right? When you're thinking about going from a hospital system that's structured, that's, there's consistency in that, there's, what the next day is going to be like, to forging out on your own and starting your own company, not knowing if it's going to be successful. Walk us through that decision-making process for you and your co-founder, your dad.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that prepared me in the clinical setting is constantly having to advocate for child life services for myself, because it's not a well-known profession, much like nursing or, being a physician or a provider. We're often having to explain what we do and why it's important. And you're really, an essential part of the care team, but you get really good at advocating, not only for yourself and your position, but also for the needs of families. And so I found a lot of parallels there in terms of advocating for child life services, to be equitable and available for all families. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but I think, courage is definitely a thing. I think having the courage to get it wrong has been something that I've learned. We have had so many mess ups, so many mistakes, so many moments where we, are up in the middle of the night thinking, have we just made a complete mistake? We have other people's money invested in this. And so getting comfortable with those moments, and instead of getting really fearful about it, but just trying to understand more. I would add another diamond for entrepreneurship, and that would just be curiosity without judgment, and just being really curious about, if we go this direction, what could that look like? And so that's really where we're at.
Yeah, when I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk about having a plan, but also being open to the forces around us, shifting and adjusting that plan. You'll hear entrepreneurs who have had ventures that have failed, and it's because they've kind of stuck to the idea or to the plan versus listening to what the market wants or needs, and how their company can adjust.
Totally.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Katie Taylor. She's the co-founder and CEO of Child Life on Call. I want to give you a chance to talk about your podcast and plug that and let people know where they can find the Child Life on Call podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just head to childlifeoncall.com, you will be directed to wherever you need to go. So from the podcast to free resources for families, if you are a provider or you are a parent, you will find something there. But the Child Life on Call podcast is, really, I am much like you, Paul. I have the privilege of getting to interview amazing parents who are courageous enough to share their vulnerable moments, to share their ideas, to share their collaboration with the care team, really to serve as guides for other parents who are at the beginning of their journey. So I strongly recommend, if you are a parent or a professional who works in healthcare or just curious about the human experience, the parents who share on the podcast have absolutely been instrumental in paving the way for other parents to get through these difficult experiences.
So, Katie, we like to have a little bit of fun here at the end of each podcast, where we
Great.
do what we call the lightning round, some quick hitter questions to give you to give you an opportunity to answer those. So how about your favorite class at Penn State?
Oh, definitely Soch 119 with Frank. I can't remember his last name, but that was a life-changing
Sam
class.
Richards?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, such a blast, and you got your DNA tested, and it was really cool.
Yeah, Soch 119 is one of the more popular answers here on the podcast.
That's
Sam
awesome.
Richards and his wife, Lori Mulvey, still on the faculty here
Oh,
at Penn
whoa.
State. What was your most memorable or favorite Lionette experience?
I'd say, just being on the field at Beaver Stadium, it was actually meant more to my grandparent. He said, my granddad was like, "I always thought we'd have a Donovan on the field, but I never thought it'd be Katie," and there I am.
That's amazing. If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Ooh, really good question. I'm gonna get a little existential here. I'm gonna say Buddha.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I think, just a guy who really embraced the human experience. I think that would be really interesting to just look at someone and chat with them who is so internal to their own feelings.
All right. And you're in Austin, Texas. Buddha flies into Austin. Where do you take him for dinner?
Absolutely. We go to, I'm going to say two things. One is ATX Cocina. It's one of my favorite Mexican places down here, right next to downtown. And then second, we got to go to get some barbecue somewhere. So we could go to Franklin's or we could go any one of those places, but just have some good down home barbecue.
Okay. Bucky's or Sheets?
Oh God, break my heart in two. I The made to order at Sheetz is a big part of my upbringing, but now that I'm here in Texas, we can't look at a Bucky sign and not go in. So it has to be an even score for me.
All right. All right. How about your most unusual We Are moment? An unexpected place where someone noticed you as a Penn Stater or called out We Are, or you saw a fellow Penn Stater and called out We Are.
Yeah, anywhere here in Texas. In fact, while I was here this past weekend, I was at Penn State. I kept wanting to be like, "Hey, there's a guy with Penn State stuff, or there's a girl with Penn State stuff," and they're like, "Well, we're at Penn State." But I'd say anywhere here in the ATX, we look at each other. Luckily, my brother and I, we often say it to each other. But yeah, anywhere down here in Austin, we come together.
That's amazing. We were talking off air how we've both been in London recently, and we were walking in front of Buckingham Palace. We were going one direction, coming the other direction. Was a guy wearing a Penn State shirt, and I yelled out "We Are," and he looked and he's like, "Oh yeah, Penn State." So
You're like,
I
"Thank you."
yeah, I caught him by surprise. How about your favorite Penn State sport?
I mean, beyond the dance team, because that's kind of a given, I would say football. It's the game changing, and also we were there, went to all the women's basketball games too, and so women's basketball and football are a tie for me.
Excellent, excellent. You were just recently back here. What is your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
This is going to sound so boring. It's got to be vanilla. It's just the classic creamery vanilla that is untouched. Down here we've got Amy's ice cream, the Mexican vanillas. There's nothing like creamery vanilla that is just smooth, and it's definitely the one for me.
That's awesome. It's the number one bestseller at the creamery.
And there's a reason.
Katie, we want to thank you for joining us on the podcast today. It's alumni like you who are having great impacts on your community. And by allowing us to pass your story, it elevates the value of all Penn State degrees. And so thank you so much for joining us and allowing us to share your story.
Paul, thanks for having me. It was so nice to meet you, and I'll come back anytime, and so excited to share what you're doing and how you're sharing other alumni stories. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks to our producer, Vincent Lungaro, for all the work that he does behind the scenes to make the magic of this podcast come together. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. While you're there, give us a rating, write a review, go ahead and subscribe. It helps us spread the word to other Penn Staters. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thank you for listening and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are